Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Gaming with me, Tony Mo, and today I'm here to give you my impressions of the Dark Below DLC that recently released for Destiny. We're not just here to just talk about the content of the expansion. I've actually spent a lot of time with it. I really wanted to focus on some of the more important key elements that I feel like are, could be easily overlooked, because obviously we have the content and we have the new things you can do, but what about, story and the new characters and the sort of tone and theme that the Dark Below brings to Destiny? It's more than just a bunch of content for us players to sink our teeth into. It hopefully is, an example of the sort of direction that Bungie is trying to take as they continue to expand and create more things for us to explore as Guardians in the world of Destiny. So, the first thing I want to start off talking about is actually a really key enemy or, character, NPC that you'll run into really early on in the expansion. That is Omnigul. Omnigul is an extremely powerful wizard who is also the strike boss for the new strike. She is sort of Crota's right-hand woman, I guess you could say. She's really powerful, she's terrifying, and she's also very dark as a character. She's sort of horror-inspired. Now, you don't really hear her say much, and it's not like she actually talks to you. She really just screams a lot and generally does really evil crap and makes your day really difficult. But much like the rest of the Dark Below expansion, she sets this sort of dark, almost horror-inspired mood for me. And it kind of really brought out the, some feelings for me that Bungie's always been afraid to make their games really dark. When you look back at Halo, things like the Grunts and the Elites, they're actually kind of, brutal in a sense in their design, but there's always something comical about them. The Grunts are just a bunch of goofy idiots who are absolutely terrified of Master Chief. They think he's a monster. So they've never really been able to indulge in that really dark sort of horror setting that a lot of the books actually brought to Halo. And I feel it's the same way with Destiny. While there isn't really a lot of goofiness going on here with some of the characters, some of them are just so, they become identified by the player like the dregs as being useless unless you're playing on like Nightfall difficulty, and they start to carry their own little sort of goofy personality. But then here you have Omnigul, who there's nothing funny about her at all. She's not a funny character, and like I said, she doesn't speak much. She just screams a lot. She reminds me more of a witch than a wizard, which the more you play the Dark Below expansion, the more you probably will end up calling the wizards witches, because they just feel more like witches and less like wizards with their screams, and also with the sort of like really torn up garb that they wear. But Omnigul was a really interesting character for me. I think she's probably one of the best villains in the game, and she's easily one of the most memorable for me. Out of all the strikes that I've played, maybe you remember things like Fogoth. Fogoth is a very well-designed strike boss. He's this sort of hideous ogre. He's been chained up down there, and you almost feel bad when you kill him. It's a very sort of Shadow of the Colossus type thing when you finally defeat Fogoth. And then you have Omnigul, who's just a really memorable and terrifying character that is probably one of the more difficult strikes in my opinion, especially in the higher difficulties, because of her burst damage. Her burst damage is brutal, and even something like the Titan Shield is taken down so quickly by it. It's insane how much damage she can do if you're caught in the wrong place. Not to mention the splash damage that she also dishes out. And it was one of the most difficult strikes in the game, hands down, and also one of the most enjoyable, though, for that exact reason. But she really is, out of her and Fogoth, probably the only two really genuinely memorable strike bosses for me. Even the raid bosses inside of, the first raid, the Vault of Glass, granted I've only ran it once, they just didn't stick out to me, Omnigul immediately shows up during one of the very first story missions in your face, and you're just like, holy crap. And, you think you're just going to go ahead and kill her, it's just another wizard, and she turns out to be so much more. So kudos to Bungie on her design as a whole. I don't know if that's something that they intentionally did, or if it just turned out that way. Maybe most people don't even actually look at her in the same light that I do, but I think she is a really great introduction to the game. And it's actually sad that you kill her off in the strike so quickly. She doesn't really have too much time to develop as a character and just do a little bit more. And I think that is what one of the main problems that I want to talk about before we start talking about story and the other bits of content and gear that comes to Destiny with the Dark Below, is the length of this content. I understand that Bungie is really going for the replayability thing, and this is where people like to tell me that Destiny isn't an MMO. But what Bungie has done with Destiny is take the best parts and some of the worst parts of an MMO and put it into a first-person shooter that functions and has really the same sort of size and perspective as something like Borderlands. That's just, there's no other way around it. That's exactly what they've done here. So their thought, though, is they look at this from the MMO side of things, and they say, hey, well, you know, we'll just put in a couple story missions, maybe like 2-3 hours, right? Throw in a strike in a raid, and people will be able to replay that for months, right? And don't get me wrong, people probably will, but you're really restricting players who don't want to run the raid, or who don't actually care about grinding strikes for gear, you know, who actually wanted to explore more of the world. You're restricting the amount of content that they're getting. And I guess if that's just the way they're going to do things moving in the future, then, you know, that crowd will go ahead and leave, and you'll be left with the hardcore people who don't mind running the weekly strike like myself, and, you know, don't mind doing the raid whenever possible. You're really just making a game that heavily relies on replayability. And I'm not saying that Destiny doesn't have that, because it most definitely does. I would just like to see more in terms of the actual story content. Now, how is the story presented to us this time around in the Dark Below? A little bit better than it was in vanilla. You actually have Eris, of course, Eris Morn, being sort of this character who's creeped out of the darkness finally after hiding away for many years. And she was one of the original, I don't know if she's a guardian, but one of the original people to actually try and take down a Hive Lord, you know, Crota. And she's sort of scarred from that, and she's been hiding away in the darkness. And it shows in her character design. She's very dark, and you can tell darkness has almost consumed her. It's become a part of her life. Not to mention the weapons and the gear she gives out are also Hive-inspired. Things like the Murmur, which is a fusion rifle that you're granted. Everyone is granted just by completing her story missions. And the cool thing about the Murmur is it isn't just a weapon that is given to the player. It's actually a tool that you're pretty much handed by Eris to do her bidding. She basically gives you this, and then, you know, you start to look at the bounties and the other missions that she gives you, and it's obvious that the Murmur is going to be an extremely important asset to actually completing those missions and bounties. So I thought that was a really cool piece of design, whether or not it was intentional or not. Either way, it's pretty awesome. Eris's voice acting is really great. She speaks out to the player a lot more, not just in the story missions, but also in the strike, which I thought was a nice change of pace, you know. Giving her an opportunity to present herself more as a character and really kind of show her personality and what she's about, why she exists, why she has crawled out of the darkness to help the Guardians take down Crota and Omnigul. And a lot of just good voice acting, I think, is really what helps bring that character out, because otherwise we don't see her. We don't see her moving or functioning. I think the lack of NPCs actually showing up in-game is something that has bothered me since day one. You know, why don't we have rare moments in the story where, like, Lord Shaxx is down on the Cosmodrome smashing people to pieces, or Eris shows up and, you know, casts, you know, starts actually engaging in a firefight with us while we're taking on Omnigul. Things like that would have been interesting, and they would have helped bring the game to life a little bit more. I want to see elements like that brought into the game moving into the future. I doubt we will. It seems they're really focused on just players in the environments with the monsters, killing the monsters. But I think bringing friendly NPCs to the ground would be a nice touch. It was something that Halo did very well. You know, you're down on Earth as Master Chief, and you're running into these just, you know, small groups of Marines even, or, you know, someone like, you know, like Colonel Keyes throughout the story. There's just nice touches of, hey, this is an NPC, they're going to go with you for a little bit because they are important to the story. They're, you know, what is happening in the game is just important to them as it is to you. I want to see things like that moving in the future. But in general, the way the story is told is a big step up from vanilla. Is it still great? No. I think, again, you know, more representations of these new characters actually being physically expressed in the environment, whether it be through cutscenes, kind of like we saw with the Stranger. I thought the Stranger was a very well presented character. She and, you know, other characters in the single player in those cutscenes may not be the greatest voiced characters, or they may not have the best designs, but just the fact that they existed in a cutscene is more than can be said for people like Lord Shaxx and, you know, and your Titan Vanguard and you know, Eris Morn even. So definitely something I would like to see change as they continue to expand on Destiny's universe. Now, of course, we have the content. We have the new story missions, which not a lot. There's basically 3 core story missions, and then there's these sort of side story missions then that start to lead into these bounties that you're given from Eris. There's some nice stuff done with these. One of the final story missions that you sort of get from Eris requires you to do some pretty hardcore tasks, including punching cursed thralls, which, if you aren't aware of what cursed thrall is, they actually explode, and you have to punch 5 of them without dying. When you die, it resets that progress, and then there's like 4 more of those types of missions that you have to go out and do in order to unlock this this set of gauntlets from Aeris. So they've made creative ways for the player to work towards unlocking new gear, rather than just saying all of the new gear is like grind fest, you know, earn this many strange coins, this many this many that. So well done on that for sure. Definitely a nice way to get the players some of the new gear in the game without making them just grind for all of it. New weapons, new gear in general. There's brand new gear that exists not just on a legendary and an exotic scale, but also on a rare level. So you can find brand new level 18, level 20 rare gear. All of the new gear is marked with a 1 on the top right corner, so you know it's from the expansion. A lot of it actually has a higher base damage than some of the legendary or even, you know, old rare 20 gear that you might be carrying around. So some of the weapons you pick up off the ground might actually be useful, at least for players who are still sort of leveling. And I think having that gear exist gives players who are still down in like 18 or 19 or even 20 a reason to continue to grow their character, even though the DLC is out and they can't actually get their hands on a lot of it. It gives them a reason to work towards 30 so they can eventually start to play some of this content. That's the other side of things. We now have a new playlist that is focused on level 28 strike playlist. So rather than just the 26 and then hopping up to the big 30, or to the level 28 Nightfall one, the Nightfall strikes are now 30, and there's now a 28 playlist that focuses on all of the strikes, including the new strike from the DLC. So I thought that was smart to actually include that, and it gives us a nice middle ground. I still don't understand the way the difficulty gap goes on some of these strike playlists. Maybe it's because they don't want to split up the community so much. They'd rather have people, you know, sort of every other level. But you're getting a lot of these issues where it's becoming difficult for even 3 people to actually complete what used to be the daily, you know, story mission. It would be something that 3 friends could sit down and not have an issue with. Now there's times where this daily story mission is level 30 or nothing. And I don't think that's fair to people who haven't quite gotten to 30 yet. It's not the easiest thing to do. And if the DLC was supposed to bring more players back to the game, that's kind of doing the opposite, and it's sort of pushing them away once they come back and realize, I can't even run that, you know? Like, how am I supposed to get strange coins? How am I supposed to even unlock this exotic gear to help get my character to 30? So some weird decisions made there by Bungie that I just don't quite understand. Finally, you have the 3 new Crucible maps. 2 of which I did not find to be anything special. In fact, I hated them. The only symmetrical map in the game was introduced. I don't remember the name of it because I cared so little about it. And it was actually the worst map I've ever played in Destiny. It was just an absolute, just corner camp chaos fest. There was no strategy. It felt completely unorganized. And even when playing with the team, it just wasn't a fun map to play. However, Skyshock, which is one of the brand new maps that takes place on the Cosmodrome, is a much more open map. It reminds me of something like Blood Gulch even in the way it's designed. It has a couple tight close quarters indoor areas. One side of the map is almost a lane that is really broken up, that is sort of medium to short range combat, and then the other side is towards an actual towards a beach leading to the ocean, and that is a really open portion of the map. So you have these 3 distinct areas that are all sort of different types of combat, and that was nice because that meant that you didn't have to constantly be mowed down by that one guy running that ridiculous fusion rifle. You didn't have to constantly be sniped by that one guy with a sniper rifle. You could sort of move about the map as you saw fit, and it rewards players who are good at using all types of weapons to engage at all types of distances. And that map felt the most consistent to play, and it was the most consistently enjoyable when playing with a team and also when playing alone. So I think we need to see more maps like that with a larger variety. I get that people want smaller maps, but I almost think that the way Destiny is designed with player abilities and things like the Titan shoulder charge, small maps just don't work. They're not as fun. I want to see more medium to large scale maps with, you know, nice bits of variety for CQB and long distance combat all thrown into one map. That makes much more sense to me. So as a whole, I guess the big question that a lot of people are going to have to ask now is, you know, do I buy the DLC at $20? You can either buy the 2-pack, will get you the Dark Below and the House of Wolves whenever that happens. I believe that's coming in the next couple of months for $34.99, or you can buy just individual expansions at $20. And that's a bit steep to me. It really genuinely is. I think that's where you start to see some of Activision's control over the game starting to show through. You have a game like World of Warcraft, published by Activision Blizzard, that, you know, retails a $40 expansion every couple years, which has an insane amount of content. And this is where I start to agree with people who say Destiny is an MMO. I don't think we can expect the same amount of content for Destiny. It's just not feasible, especially when you have things, you know, like last-gen consoles still having the game on them, you know? There's just a lot of restrictions that start to apply there, so we can't expect the same amount of content, but I don't think that means that we should expect a $20 price tag. I feel like that's a little bit steep, and really the worth of that DLC is completely dependent on how much time and how you choose to play Destiny. If you're someone who only is going to play for the story missions, and maybe you'll play the strike once, then I don't see the $20 being worth it. However, if you're someone who's going to grind gear and try and get to level 32, even if you don't run the Vault of Glass, if you're just somebody who enjoys running the strikes and who plays the game on a weekly basis with friends, then yes, it is definitely worth it. I mean, you're going to probably get several hundred hours out of this DLC, you know, not to mention the time you're going to spend playing the old stuff. So that's really my overall thought on the Dark Below. Am I disappointed with it? Am I impressed with it? I'm definitely not impressed with it. I think they made a lot of steps in the right direction. I really love Omnigul. Probably one of my all-time favorite, you know, video game villains, despite having very little that we actually know about her. I love the new strike. I love the tone of the Dark Below, and I'm definitely interested to see what Bungie continues to do with these expansions as we move forward. So, if you guys have been playing the Dark Below, feel free to let me know what you think of it in the comment section below. If you have any questions about, you know, things that I didn't show in the video or things that I forgot to discuss, feel free to ask me. I'll see you in the next one.